I'm extremely happy to be in the studio with Jeffrey Foucault again. Jeffrey, it's great to see you.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
And congratulations on this album. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really, it was beautiful to make. It took a long time to get out for a variety of reasons. It took longer than usual.
Why?
Well, I was just a bunch of things without getting too far into anybody's business. There were some health issues, and it just took a minute.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, like you want to make a record and put it out, Bob Dylan style, like a week and a half later or something, like Positively 4th Street, but you can't. It's just because you got to wear all the hats.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah. So the Universal Fire, it took me a while to realize that what you're talking about was Universal Studios.
Yeah.
In Hollywood, burned down in 2008.
Yeah, and I didn't know about it then because that was the year my daughter was born, and I was not paying any attention to things like the New York Times. And I read about it later, and I was sort of floored by it. And this often happens to me in the cycle of making something. I'll write down phrases, and that just the phrase "the Universal Fire" was really musical and interesting. And then I, in the event, years later, having sort of revolved that in my mind for a long time, then my friend Billy Conway, who played on this program with me twice, and who we were on the road together, most of a decade, just the two of us, and then sometimes with the full band. Bill got sick and died, and so essentially I used the Universal Fire, the idea of losing all that music, the masters of a bunch of American music that was really bedrock and sort of important to me and to him, as the stalking horse or whatever for just the idea of losing anything, right? What does it mean to have something? What does it mean to lose it? And every song on the record, and this sounds, I'm sure, totally rock and roll and thrilling, but every song on the record deals with the idea of loss, from a different vantage point. And I didn't realize that until I had already made the thing and cut away everything that wasn't going to be on the record. And then I realized there was this sort of coherent, thematic thing, which is lucky because you have to talk to publicists and stuff,
Radio guys.
Yeah, radio.
Yeah. Yeah. Last time you were in the studio, Billy Conway was here with you playing drums on that tour. I've never met a more friendly guy. Mm-hmm. That man, he just is so easy to talk to. He's so interested in you as a person when he talks to you. He just looks in your face and asks you questions like, what books are you reading these days? No one's ever asked me that before.
He loved to ask that.
Tell me about Billy. He's from Minnesota, and you've been playing with him for a long time. Yeah.
So Billy was he was born in northeast Iowa. He lived around Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin until he was probably in the junior high range, and then he moved to Owatonna. And he had been a speed skating phenom. He won a race on a pair of figure skates because that's all he could afford, and won a race. And they started running him. He joined the team, and he beat Eric Heiden. He was apparently very good. His parents didn't have any money, and then when they got to Owatonna, there was no speed skating, and but everybody was playing hockey, so he became this great hockey player.
Of course,
right? And then he was the captain of the team at Yale, playing hockey. And he was supposed to go to the '80 Olympics, and then he got hurt, and those were all his buddies on that team, and that was sort of this interesting turning point where he decided not to try to do things. I mean, I don't know how conscious it was, but I remember he said, like, he worked so hard for that Olympic thing, and it didn't happen when he got hurt. And he sort of turned away from the idea of trying for things and just wanted to see what would happen next. And so he was a public school teacher in a inner city school in Boston, working with really at-risk kids. And he ended up working as a cowboy on a ranch in Montana, and in between times he was in two famous rock and roll bands. One was called Treat Her Right, the other was called Morphine. But, if you want to talk about Billy as a person, he just had this astounding ability to make people feel like he approved of them, and they wanted his approval, right? I mean, everybody from sound engineers to, waitresses or whatever, just people, he had this interesting magnetism. He sort of looked like think about how your grandma looked at you, right? Like you could do nothing wrong. That's how Billy looked at you. And it was, it made people want to live up to that thing. He had a really beautiful impact on people.
He was your best friend.
My best friend.
How do you write an album of songs about your best friend?
Especially I think I wrote an album, or I probably wrote 2 albums. He came along in my experience of music at a point where I was really ready to just walk away from it, because I was playing by myself. I was deeply tired of hearing myself sing and play and talk. And that's easy to have happen when you're out by yourself, because music, when you play with other people, music is new every night, as you know. It's always a conversation. But when you play by yourself, inevitably there's an element of doing what you know how to do, which is kind of death to the experience of being up there and really inhabiting, the thing that you're trying to do. So I felt like I was about ready to give up on it, and then we started traveling duo, and I learned so many things just traveling around with Billy about how to approach music, how to be in it, how to have the discipline to stick with, say, like, I think he wouldn't let me play anything but the same set list for like a year, and I'd be like, I'd get restless and antsy. I'd be like, what if we had this song? He'd be like, no. So, and he was, he had 20 years on me. He graduated high school the year I was born, so he had all this time on the road, and I'd had at that point, 10 or 12 years on the road, but nothing like the sort of categorical sense of the whole experience and both sides of it, right? This was a guy that had all the help in the world, the 2 buses and the fancy high-powered managers and the private planes and stuff, and he was perfectly willing to go play for 12 people in a town you never heard of, and he'd carry all of his stuff into the club by himself, and he would never once complain, and that's a real good way to be.
Billy moved to Montana, as you said, and now, since his passing, there's the Billy Conway Artist Fund I've been reading about, helping indigenous artists in Montana make a record or do a career, or...
Yeah, it's run by his partner, Lori Sargent, and there were a couple of people who approached right after Bill died and said that they were interested in donating a certain amount of money toward whatever was going to be the memorial to him, and Sarge felt like it should be back in Montana, and it should be related to Native American contenders in the arts and music, because Billy, I took a minor in American Indian Studies, and Billy had an independent study with a Lakota man named Henry, and so we'd had a similar experience, and a lot of our reading lined up, going back to books about that part of our history, our combined history, and which is just the darkest, as dark a chapter as America has. And so it was something that I think he would have been very proud to do anything for anybody living on a reservation or having grown up on a reservation. It's the poorest people in America, and he had a deep affinity for poor people because he had been poor himself coming up, and also various times through his whole life. So.
I'm talking with Jeffrey Foucault about his latest record, The Universal Fire. Came out in September.
Yeah.
Now I'm reading about a Universal Fire acoustic album.
Yeah, that is a desperate attempt to make enough money to tour a 5-piece band, is what that is. So I made a fantastic full band record.
By yourself?
In Tucson.
Okay.
Well, I made the one in Tucson with the full band, and it cost, a great deal of money, and I took it to a label, and they spent a bunch of money on it. And then this summer, I was looking at the fall, and we're going to be out half of every month, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to ever bring home any money. So I sat down and re-recorded all the songs by myself, and I started thinking that's just going to be me and a guitar. And then
the same songs from the album.
Same songs. And then what happened is, the songs were built for a band, so there's all these, the architecture is based on things happening, solos and such. Yeah. So I started playing. I'm not a lead player, but I started playing slide guitar and acoustic guitar and octave mandolin, and I found my real banjo was up at my studio in the hills, and the local kid
who
lives right there. I did play some right-handed piano. He had snapped a string off, so that was out of play. I was letting him go in there and play all my guitars. He's like 13 or something. Anyway, so I went down to the basement and found some old banjo. It must have been Chris's, my wife Chris's. And I put that on there, and I did play some one-handed piano. And it was a really interesting process. And then over the course of doing it, I added in 7 songs that were part of the same batch of songs that didn't make it on the album.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so I made that available. It's not released. It's just available. If somebody goes to my website and they go to the mailing list page and they join the mailing list, then they can get this download for free. And it's like I used a different version of the cover, or the same cover of the album. This is a color version, and I thought that's what really I was trying to do, is just show, like you pick a piece of glass up and you hold it up to the light and you get the prismatic thing where it shows you different colors. That's what I was trying to do with those songs.
What's next after this? Rest for a while, right?
Yeah.
This has been a long tour.
I can think of any number of things that are next, but musically, I really don't know. Okay. We're gonna go out in 25. I know we're going to Europe with the full band at the end of the summer, and what parts of Europe I'm still not sure. And I'll have some running around.
Cool.
Eric is in Ani DeFranco's band this spring, so we'll lose Eric for a little while. But hopefully when she's off the road, then we can be on the road a little bit. It'll just depend on how that lines up. But the USA push for this record has been September to December, and this is the last leg. So we've been out just having a ball. And, it's inevitable that you talk about money, but money's not. I mean, we all could have gotten completely different jobs if that's what we were after. So we're just out trying to make it swing.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on this record. It's a fine one. It's one of your best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was so fun. It was so fun to make. We went down to Tucson to work at WaveLab, at least partly because of the records that came out of there in the 90s and the early aughts, including the Calexico records that John worked on, John Convertino, our drummer. And John also played with Rainer Tacek, who was one of my favorite slide players and a really beautiful musician, who is sort of the father of that desert rock scene in Tucson. And Rainer passed away in the 90s, but I had these records that John and Joe from Calexico were the rhythm section on at least one Rainer Tacek record that didn't come out till after he died. And I was familiar with his work from Richard Buckner, and there was something about Tucson. We all had to fly, right? We got one guy in Rhode Island, one guy in Montana, one guy in Minnesota, one guy in El Paso, and I live out in New England, so we were going to fly somewhere, and we were working in January. So
didn't you write a song about
Tucson?
Rainer?
Seemed right.
Here Comes Rainer?
Yeah, there's a song called Here Comes Rainer.
Yeah, I thought so.
I wrote that I don't even know where that came from, but I've been dedicated to his, you can't play like him. Nobody's going to play like him, but learning how to phrase and create some of the textures and some of the non-linear looping that he does, which is that tends to recur uneven to the beat. And he was a real early guy with the loop stuff, not the sound on sound, some real wanky stuff that you always hear, but like he found a new way to play slide guitar and a new way to use a looping station. So he had these two of those old Digitech pedals, the PDS 8000, and he'd have one go on and the other one go off. And now you have one pedal that can do all that stuff. But at the time, he was definitely ahead of his game. He recorded with Robert Plant. He recorded with Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top.
Yeah.
Robert Plant was driving through the desert with Jimmy Page and heard him on public radio and drove to Tucson to meet him.
Wow.
Right? And then they ended up doing stuff together. He was just... like everybody that's great at this, you might not ever hear of them, right? He was the kind of person that's going to influence a lot of people. I know he had some records out in England, but he never really stuck it hard in the States, But if you go to Tucson, everybody remembers him.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you for coming in. Congratulations on the record. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Yeah, always a pleasure.
The Current is public media made possible thanks to member support.